Welcome to Permission to Thrive. I'm your host, Suzi Lula. As a spiritual therapist for over 20 years, I have the honor and privilege of ushering women and mothers just like you on a journey from simply surviving to powerfully thriving. I also have the honor of raising our son, Will, who is now a young adult, with my longtime partner, Jamie, so I'm right there on the journey with you. Consider this your personal sanctuary, your space to meet your heart, embrace your messy, and come home to your most authentic, extraordinary self. My hope is that you leave resourced and inspired because you are here to shine. Welcome to Permission to Thrive. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Permission to Thrive. We are so glad that you are here with us, and I'm so grateful to have two of my soul care coaches in spiritual psychology back with me today, Bost and Geno LePlaca. So welcome, you guys. Today, we are diving into a conversation about the importance of sisterhood, empowering women through sisterhood, empowering mothers through sisterhood, all things women, all things mother empowerment, all things sisterhood. So for those of you just getting to know Leslie and Geno, in addition to their formal bios, which are found in your show notes, you are both certified soul care coaches in spiritual psychology through my program. You are certified conscious parenting coaches through Dr. Shefali. You are certified compassionate inquiry coaches through Gabor Mate. And you both lead together a presence process group. You each have other modalities that you are certified in, such as NLP and different modalities you all can look up in the show notes. But you are clearly very practiced masters in the world of coaching and personal development. And you were both on the podcast. Episode 17, which was entitled Rewriting Cultural Messaging, Thriving on Your Own Terms. So for all of you listening, please go back to episode 17 and you can get to know Leslie and Geno more deeply. We had such a rich conversation about women in all of our different cultures. The two of you represent Latin American cultures. And that conversation was so rich, I got tons of great feedback about it. So go back and listen, everyone. As I said, you're both from Latin American backgrounds, so I know that we will be weaving in and highlighting the important cultural paradigm shifts that can empower us women and empower us mothers if we embrace them. So welcome. Welcome, Leslie. Welcome, Geno.
Thank you, Suzi. Thank you for having us again. It is such a treat to be here with you and with my sister Geno. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Suzi. This is so nice to be the three together and continue our conversation.
Yeah, I love it too. And especially around sisterhood and empowering women, empowering mothers, our passion. So what I know is that we all want to know that our lives matter, that we are important to those around us, that we feel seen, that we feel valued, that we feel heard, that we are cherished as women, as mothers, as daughters, that we are living thriving lives. And yet, research shows that most women in general, and certainly most mothers, do not experience ourselves as thriving. And I wrote my book, The Motherhood Evolution, because as women, and especially myself as a mother, we aren't given a vision of ourselves to thrive, to have permission to thrive as women, as mothers. And we can often experience our womanhood, our motherhood as lonely and overwhelmed, exhausted, or we can feel like I certainly felt like an island, like I was the only one experiencing certain things. So there are so many rules out there that say taking care of ourselves as women, taking care of ourselves as mothers is selfish. Put others first. I'm a bad mom if I take care of myself, or put any attention on me. Or when I do take care of myself, I feel tremendous guilt, mom guilt. We'll get into that if either one or both of you have experienced that. We also hear be nice, go with the flow, be liked, be accepted, don't make waves. And lastly, I think we're all recognizing how inundated, indoctrinated, and cultured or conditioned we are in a toxic patriarchy that says the men take the lead, the man is the authority. And so I would just love to hear from each of you if any of these rules or other rules ever got in your way, anything that you were living under as a woman, as a mom when your kids were younger. Leslie, do you want to start, or either one of you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Susie. First of all, I want to thank you for the book that you wrote, because it was one of the first books. Well, it was the first book that I read about motherhood in a way that allowed me to connect with myself beyond motherhood. And it was the first time that I made space for who I am beyond all the roles. When I was reading your book, I just remember feeling a great sense of almost relief and permission to allow myself to it's as if you were giving me permission to give myself permission. So thank you. It is a book that's very dear to me, and I'm so grateful that it came my way. I remember the first time I heard you speak through Shafali's cohort, and I was just like, who is this woman? I want to know more. And just the way that you allowed me to open up curiosity, to give myself the opportunity to look beyond just those labels. So I'll start with that. Thank you. And in what you said, I mean, I think especially in Latin countries, and me being from Mexico, there's just this cultural conditioning and programming that is already so innate since we are little girls as to what it means when you get married and when you have children, and what your role or your label is. And it's very boxed in, where it's almost as if there's no window to see out of that box. And so I do remember, because I was always a very independent girl when I was growing up, and I had a lot of things happen through my life. I was adopted when I was 15, so I left home. So I was able to travel as a babysitter, and different experiences that allowed me to see that there was more beyond the box. However, the moment that I got married, and I was married very young to I guess he's not my high school sweetheart because he's older, but I was in high school when we started dating. So we got married when I was 25, engaged when I was 24. And even though I was considered myself so independent and versatile in some ways, the moment I got married, I came back to that cultural conditioning and programming without even realizing it. Mm-hmm. So much that my husband tells a story that when one of the first weeks that we were married and we came back from our honeymoon, I called him up at work and I said, so I had never cooked for him before when we were dating, and we had dated for 7.5 years. But the moment we were married, I felt like this, oh, now it's my job and my duty to cook for him daily. And I did it with great joy, but not knowing that I was also following and starting to pave the way for expectations from myself to be the wife, and the perfect wife in a certain way. So I called him and I said, so would you like fish, chicken, or meat for lunch today? And brought up a menu, and he was like, who is this person? Because she's never cooked for me. And now we got married. And though it's a funny story that we connect back to, and it was, for him, it was like really nice to hear that. It was also the first time where we started to create this relationship where he became mothered and I became that cultural conditioning, the program that was unconscious. And then fast forward many children later and many years of marriage later, I came to a halt of the overwhelm and the exhaustion and the lack of self-care and the over mothering him and my children and not even looking at myself. So again, your book was the first time that, in fact, I think you were the first person that I ever heard say that a mother could connect and do any sort of self-care beyond the manicure and pedicure. And I was like, what is that? What does that mean? And I remember writing all the things that you said in a video, like, oh my goodness, you mean like I can do all of these things and they would nourish my soul. So yes, that's a little bit of how I came to start opening up and creating that window and that box for myself. Even when I thought I would not be boxed in because I was so independent, I fell
Well,
right into it.
Well, exactly. And I think that's what's so profound about your sharing. And I'm hoping that everyone listening can relate in some way, shape, or form. I certainly can. So, first of all, thank you so much for your kind words about my book. And I absolutely wrote that book because also no one had given me permission. I had heard no one give me permission to think that I could thrive alongside of raising thriving children. Of course, every one of us, of course, we want to raise thriving children. We want our children to thrive and to have that inner sense of well-being. And no one had ever told me, you're allowed to thrive alongside your children. And in fact, to the degree that you are thriving is to the degree that you give them permission to thrive as well. And so I needed this book for myself. And so anytime any woman, any mom reflects back to me that it gave you a particular permission to have a vision that is not out there culturally yet, it delights me and is so deeply moving and meaningful to me. So thank you. I appreciate it. And to what you're saying, can everybody relate? We think that, I'll speak for myself. Yes, I was the same as you. I can so relate. I left home when I was 16. I studied in Europe. I came back, went to graduate school, had 2 graduate degrees. I'm living my best life. I'm independent. And then I got married and had a child and constricted into said box. I constricted from this independent being, this soul, and I constricted into a role of what? A woman, a wife. And when you described that you actually, in your box of wife, actually started mothering your husband, I mean, can every woman out there relate? I want a woman who can't relate to raise their hand, because isn't that what we do? We unconsciously go back into this role often. I won't say everyone, just speaking for myself here. We can go back into an unconscious role that we have been taught. And then what you said, I think, is so poignant. I hope lots of women can relate. I began to mother my husband. So I wasn't even really in the role of wife. I stepped right into role of mother to my husband. And you also said, which I think is so poignant, and I hope lots of people can relate, is that that was the first seed, the beginning of resentments and
Yeah.
expectations. And we don't even realize it. You're just calling him, asking him what he wants for lunch. And you think you're being a quote, good wife. We think we're being a good mom. And we don't realize that we are actually the ones sowing the seeds of future resentments and expectations, because we are putting ourselves in a role that isn't necessary, but certainly culture tells us is necessary. And that's my passion, is helping us women, helping us mothers to break out, because this is the last thing from selfish. It's so selfless to give to myself, so I have more to give to my children, my husband. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll go to you, Heno, is this word self-care, and this phrase self-care it wasn't very popular when I first wrote my book at all. And now we do hear it. We do hear, though, that it has a lot to do with taking bubble baths and lighting candles and massages, and all of that is so necessary and so good. I have really come to elevate that phrase from self-care to soul care, because I think what you're really saying, Leslie, is that you had just begun to live your life and really feel yourself as this soul, as this spirit, as this expanded being. And then you constricted back into a role. And so I think my work and my passion is really to help women, especially mothers, especially recognize that we are all souls here. We're much greater than our respective roles, and our roles are wonderful. But when we nourish our soul, our being, our essence, our authenticity, then we bring so much richness back into these roles. So perhaps as everyone's listening, as we move through the rest of this episode, you can begin to think of yourself as a soul in your world. And what does it look like to give yourself permission to nourish that soul? So we have said a lot and covered a lot already. Heno, how would you like to add or contribute or share anything about your own journey with some of these rules?
Yeah, I think I want to add, for example, one of the key things that happen with us women, we take all these roles. From the moment we're born, we already have different roles that are expected from our parents or from our culture, what we're supposed to do. And we start to embrace them, each of them, and then all of them. And then we become these multitaskers that should do everything everyone is expecting us to do. Because someone said that you should do this, you should do that. The should on women, it's so big. Like the list goes long and on of what we should do. You should eat this way. You should not do that. You should care about this and all different things. And in my case, I had a group of women surrounded me all my life who was a matriarchy. So even though it wasn't the patriarchy normal self, because I got to meet my great-great-grandma who had outlived her husband, and then my great-grandma who had outlived hers, and then my grandma who was the head of the house and the breadwinner of the house. And then my mom married someone who was in the army, who was not there and available. So she still became that person. So even with this conditioning that women were the leader in my home, I still pick up all the roles of everything that I should do and all of it at the same time. And in my mind, I never thought like, oh, I want to get married one day. That was not my dream. My dream was, let's move out of Guatemala and let's go do something. And I did that. And it was amazing. And yet when I met my husband, I just kept adding the roles of everything that I was going to do all together at the same time and trying to do it perfect. And guess what? That's where the burnout came and all the resentment. I did not cook like Leslie because my husband cooks. So he's done that. So we switched some roles. He also had 5 sisters. So it's a bit different when you have a person who has been surrounded by female and can have that feminine understanding. Yet, I think knowing and discovering myself and learning that I needed self-care and just not the physical, right? Not just the superficial, because that one I was really good at, right? Because the condition of the Latin country is like, you must look good no matter what, right? So the hair has to look good, the nails have to look good, and God forbid you walk out in sweats. But what about the inside? In that, I learned it with you. That self-care and self-compassion, that kindness to myself, because I had been taught to be kind to others and compassion to others and take care of others. What about me? At the expense of myself, just like my mom and my grandma and everyone else, at their expense, they were taking care of everyone else.
Yes.
So that's kind of one of the things that we do. And I hope to change all that for my 3 daughters.
Yes.
We know that they can do one role and they can choose in and out of them without the shoulds.
Yes.
By being empowered.
Yes, for anyone listening who is a parent, this is another reason why the three of us are so passionate. I have an adopted daughter and a son, and it was very important to me to model to my daughter, CJ, what a thriving woman, a thriving mother looks like, because we can't tell our girls to care for themselves. They must see it, because if we didn't see it, it's just words. And the same for raising a son. I wanted to raise a son who would, in his bones, not only know to care for his own soul, but if and when he chooses a partner, that he would see the importance and honor that in all of us. And you said about being born into a matriarchal family. And I think that this is a very important context for us to speak to. I too was raised in a very matriarchal family and household. And I believe that, generationally speaking, the past 5, 6, 7, 8 generations, when you think hundreds of years, probably thousands of years, it's been thousands of years since culturally women were honored. So over generations, especially since the industrial age, where the patriarchy, and in particular toxic patriarchy, has been developed, what has happened is the feminine aspect of the matriarchy has disappeared. And so, although you and I were both raised in a matriarchy, that matriarchy, or I'll speak for myself, the matriarchy that I was raised in came from that toxic patriarchy, had been indoctrinated into that toxic patriarchy. So even the women in my family were doers. And doing is wonderful, accomplishing is wonderful, but doing to the expense of our being, doing at the expense of our feminine qualities of nurturing, nourishing, connecting, processing, sisterhood that we're here talking about, what it does is it robs us of the deep compassion, the wisdom, the nourishment that the feminine can provide. And so I was also raised in a matriarchy, but it was skewed, it was imbalanced, it didn't really contain the qualities of the feminine, because we are also conditioned that it is our doing that brings our value and our worthiness. And this is important, because what happens is it can lead to martyrdom. And so we are moving through our life, and as Leslie was saying, we don't even realize that we are beginning to sow the seeds of expectation and resentment and martyrdom, because we are taught to give to others at our own expense. And this is a particular thing that everyone listening, I would really like you to just take a moment and reflect upon. Giving to others is wonderful. It's essential. It's part of why we're here, especially as women. We're givers. We love giving to each other. But giving to another at your own expense is martyrdom. Giving to another at your own expense is actually unnecessary. We're taught that it is necessary because we were raised in such a culture of lack. But one of the things that the three of us love talking about is, what if we empowered ourselves and other women, other mothers, to begin to become aware you can parent from a paradigm of abundance? What would that be like? I can love giving to you, Leslie. I can love giving to you, Geno. I can love giving to Will and CJ and Jamie and my girlfriends and my clients, not from a place of self-deprivation. What if that was the norm? That, of course, I want to give to my children, but I want to give from a place of overflow and abundance. So I'm interested, Leslie, how did you begin to expand and transform? And what, besides my book, which I love that you reference, What is it? Is there something significant that had you create a tipping point in your life where now you're on the other side?
First of all, I love that you made that distinction in the matriarchy and how we, even though it was a matriarchy, we connected to the toxic masculine and the distinction of it being toxic, right? And that's so key because I so fell into that as well, because I did have a matriarchy as well, yet it was not connected to that divinity of our feminine being. It was definitely connecting to the control and the wanting things to go a certain way in a very toxic manner. And then that created resentment. So thank you for making that differentiation. I think it's so important for everybody listening.
You're
Go
welcome.
ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think that and you guys may have a similar experience when I first start talking to girlfriends or clients or students, and I begin to ask, what do you believe are your feminine qualities? Often we are so conditioned into a patriarchy that we actually have lost the connection. We don't even have at our fingertips. Well, what are the qualities of the feminine that we've lost? And this is my passion. I want to see a renaissance, a rebirth, a reconnection to the qualities of the feminine. So I'll just say them quickly and then you can continue, Leslie. But for any of you listening and you're wondering, yeah, what the heck happened to these feminine qualities that will truly change the world? They will change the world. Hannah and I were just at a wonderful International Women's Day event, and we were talking about when women step into and are embodied in the true feminine qualities, the world will change, because we women are not going to let war happen. We are not going to let our sons go off to war. The world will change. So the feminine qualities are the qualities that we are processors, and we are deeply and highly sensitive, and we're nurturers, and we're connectors. We can create intimacy. We have wombs. We create safety. We are the birthers of the planet. We are birthers of new ideas. We are birthers of intimate connectivity. We are birthers of sisterhood and support of ourselves and each other. This nourishing, this nurturing, not from a masculine doing, but from the feminine being. We can't even barely give ourselves permission anymore to sit and be unless we're meditating. And even meditating has become an action step. It is the quality of honoring ourselves for the being that we are, and then to bring that everywhere we go. So I just wanted to reference some of these qualities as everyone's listening, and then jump back in, Leslie, to what you were getting ready
I
to
love
say.
how synchronistic that is, because when you started speaking about the qualities, I actually grabbed my phone and I have a list that I carry with me on my phone of the qualities of the divine feminine. And I look at this list often to remind myself and check in how I am in terms of alignment with those qualities. And so you brought that up, but I'll just tell you what's on my list, because I just feel that it's so important for all of us women, and also the men listening to this, to acknowledge and hold that divine feminine in all its glory. So yes, the compassionate, wise, sees herself as whole, loves unconditionally. She's in her power, intuitive, passionate, understanding, empathetic. She's a healer. She's fertile. She's abundant, creative, curious, assertive, a truth seeker, fills up her well. She's revered and also adored by the masculine. She's also sexual. She's fierce. She's a protector, and she's able to express herself in the way that needs to be expressed with a clear knowing of her inner boundaries. I also have the divine masculine in here as well, to remind myself of that part of me too, so that I don't fall into the toxicity, and to also see my husband and my children in that divinity and be aligned with that. So thank you for bringing that up. And then to answer your question, you said, what was the moment that you realized that you had fallen into that pit, if you will, of not knowing yourself? And then how did I come out through that? Is that what I heard? Okay. So I was pregnant with my fourth baby, yet my 8th pregnancy, because I lost 4 babies in between. So I had 8 pregnancies, and this was my 8th pregnancy, my 4th child. And my husband was doing his master's at Harvard, and I had completely given myself into motherhood. I had left my company, a very successful wedding planning business, when my 3rd baby was born. And it took me like 3 years to decide to leave it, and then finally left the company and decided to devote myself to motherhood, because at this point we had a lot of children and I knew that they needed me in many ways. And there was a big break in terms of the relationship with my husband. And I realized that I had been supporting him and being the co-creator of not supporting him in a way that was authentic, but in a way that eventually was going to create resentment, right? So that he could go do all of these wonderful things, which they are amazing, but there was a part of me that was dying, and I was not in tune or attuned to that. So we had a big break. There was a moment where I didn't know if the relationship was going to continue. And we've had different moments like this. We've been together 23 years, so it's not linear, despite people thinking that we have nothing is perfect. It's beautiful in the way that it is, but it was a very big moment. And I realized that I had nothing to my name in terms, and I'm not talking about financial. I'm talking about, I didn't know who I was. I was about to give birth to another child, and I felt completely alone in the process. And there was a realization that I had put myself there as well. So there was a guilt associated with that. And I didn't know how do I even begin to get myself. I actually took 2 days. I asked him for 2 days, and I went to a hotel, and I was intuitively guided to be alone for some days to figure out what it meant if we were to break the relationship, how that would look for me being a single mother of 4 children, and it was just a huge moment. And I started the thing that obviously Henry and I have been talking about this right now. What I do best is doing. So I thought, well, maybe I just have to go back to school and do something. And I started to look for courses and thinking, well, I need to get my independence back. And it was a reaction. It wasn't a response to the issue. And however, there was a moment in this reaction where a response did come, where I was looking for marketing or finance, because I had studied finance, where I saw, no, the way is through mindfulness. And I ended up taking a course by John Kabat-Zinn and connected to a university in Amsterdam. And it was the first opening of, well, what if there is another way? It wasn't in the doing. And just like you said, now that a lot of us have used meditation to be in the doing, but it started to give a little spark of light to a possibility that there was more. And then that led me eventually to Shefali and to you and to everything you spoke about in the beginning and the work that I do with Geno. But it was a crisis moment that I hope that we don't all have to go through a crisis moment to realize that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can so appreciate what you're saying. I can't tell you the number of women and mothers that I work with that have used that exact phrase, dying on the vine. I feel like a part of me was dying on the vine. I talk about that a lot in my book and throughout my book, because you're speaking to such a theme for so many women and mothers of losing ourselves. And I know for myself, I entered from a similar type of crisis, so to speak. I didn't like who I was as a mom. I didn't like how I was showing up with Will. I didn't like the level of impatience I was witnessing in myself. And I'm thinking, this is not me. I haven't been impatient in other areas of my life and other relationships. Like, this is not the feedback I get. And literally, I didn't like how I was showing up with Will. And that was the thing that had me recognize, oh, this is not okay for me to be projecting my impatience onto a little innocent guy. Like, no bueno. Like, this is not okay. And that is what got me on my course, even though I saw no other permission out there to go take care of my soul. But what I can tell you is taking those first courageous steps, even when it wasn't popular yet and no one else was doing it, what I can tell you unequivocally is that as I began to really care for my soul and nourish myself and put myself on the map, and I've shared this often, but my editor and Shefali and other people, when I was titling my book, The Motherhood Evolution, people were suggesting that I title it Put Yourself First. Thriving Motherhood, Put Yourself First. And I didn't have the courage to write that title. But when I began doing it in my own life, what I found unequivocally is that as I really took care and nourished my soul and gave myself what I needed and fulfilled my unmet needs, my needs, I liked who I was with Will. I liked the person who showed up with my son. I showed up well nourished, not all the time, but I showed up in the version of myself that I respected. And it was in proving to myself that when I cared for my own spirit, I showed up as a different version of myself to Will. And from that moment on, I have never experienced mom guilt ever again. I can tell you, mom guilt is a cultural conditioning that comes from a capitalistic, toxic, patriarchal culture. And I'm telling everyone listening, give yourself some space to truly reflect. It is a way that I believe women and mothers are being kept down to think that taking care of ourselves, we should feel guilty. And I know guilt is huge. Mom guilt is huge out there. But I will tell you, if you give yourself a week, a month, a few months to truly embark on asking yourself, what do you need? Begin to fulfill your own needs. You will like yourself back in your respective roles. Taking care of ourselves is non-negotiable. It's essential. I will never go back. I experienced this woman after woman, mother after mother after mother. And similar to you, I wouldn't wish a crisis on any other mom. I wouldn't wish a crisis on any other woman. But if it gets you to living guilt-free and caring for your spirit and soul. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll go on to you, Heno, is that also then impassioned me around this area of sisterhood that we will move into next, is because I saw how I was actually thriving in motherhood. I was actually giving myself permission to nourish myself, and I liked who I was so much. And then other women and other mothers started asking me, what are you doing? And it began this spiral of sisterhood that is so essential to me. And we will be talking about it. So this idea of a crisis, I'm appreciating what you're saying. And for everyone listening, if you do feel like you're on that verge of that crisis, it can be your greatest breakthrough. So take what Leslie and I are offering, and then I pass it to you, Heno. What would you like to add to the conversation here?
Yes. So in my case, I was working and doing everything, and I had become really good at suppressing all emotions. So I wasn't even not feeling myself, but my physical body was having different reactions. I had frozen shoulder, my knees, hip, all kinds of things. But even that didn't stop me. I kept going, right? Because I could do everything and everything seemed fine from the outside. And what happens, you're getting validation because you're doing amazing at work, your kids are going to school, everything looks perfect from the outside, right? But my mom gets sick and she gets cancer. Within 5 months, she's gone. So I had to go through that. And one of the things that happened is right before she was diagnosed, she made a trip to visit me, to be with me, my sister, and my brother. We all live in different places. And during that moment, I noticed that she had some back pain. And I she asked me to buy her some Advil, and I did. 2 days later, she asked me to buy her more. And that's the moment I was like, wait, what's going on here? So even during that moment, she put herself on the side so she can be with us. And then as soon as she got back home, she realized she had stage 4 cancer. And 5 months after, I was grieving her. And during that grief, I also realized I didn't have a connection with my kids, or the connection that I thought I had. And then I realized that, okay, let me go and figure out how to fix this connection, because my masculine side wanted to control it still. It's like, let's use it. We can fix this. So let's go take a conscious parenting course. And during that moment, I realized that it wasn't them. It was me. I was not connected to myself. And then because of that loss of that connection, I was not able to be the parent that I wanted to be. I could not be the wife that I wanted to be. I couldn't be with other people the way I wanted to be. And I wanted to bring up something that I thought was interesting when we were talking yesterday about what we were going to talk. And selfish, it's caring about yourself, but it's when you're taking advantage of someone else, which is a very different definition of what we think it is. And as you were mentioning, when we do that self-care, for example, if I do my meditation, I know that I will be able to respond to my kids. If I don't meditate, I will react. So we have this belief that when we are taking care of ourselves means we're not taking care of others. And as you've said many times, when our cup is full, we can serve others from a light.
Yeah. Oh, Keno, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure so many individuals listening are touched and can relate. And I think, as both of you are saying, often it is a crisis. It is a breakdown that is the very thing that assists us to a breakthrough. And you are both shining examples of individuals who have used your breakdown to break through. It's just easy to stay in the breakdown if we don't have both the inner and outer support. And so, for anyone listening right now who's feeling like you are in a vulnerable state and you are aware that you are either in the midst of or feel that sense of a crisis coming on, or maybe you're just on the other side of it, this really speaks to the importance of sisterhood and support and why we really wanted to come together. And I had no idea that our conversation would unfold in this way, but what you're sharing, each one of you, leads just so perfectly into our shared passion around sisterhood, because I'm imagining you going through this crisis with your mother, Leslie, the crisis that you were describing, myself, here I am in my own home, feeling like an island, feeling like the worst mom on planet Earth, feeling like such a failure, feeling like I'm letting my son down, knowing that there's a mom inside of me, knowing that there's this woman inside of me, and yet and still that was not the woman that I had access to. That was not the woman that was showing up every day. And it has certainly become a passion of recognition that sisterhood, support, and again, this is not just for women. I know my husband, and probably you guys as husbands, you relate to this too. Jamie is always looking, and Jamie and Juan now know each other and connect. And I know that they are each and both very hungry for male relationships and support. And so I would love for each of you, as we come full circle here and close out, to speak to the importance, the value of sisterhood, why you think it's still so underestimated, what you think is possible for us. I know I have my own theories that I think that toxic patriarchy, the last legs of it right now, I don't think a toxic patriarchy wants us women coming together in numbers, because as Leslie, when you were reading from your list, if we are one thing, we are fierce. And joining together in sisterhood creates such tremendous value and support for each other. If you imagine the fierceness of each one of us as a woman, and then you put us together collectively, there is no stopping us. We will change the way that we parent. We will change the way that we mother. We will change the way that we show up as women as we join together collectively. So, Leslie, you want to jump in and speak to sisterhood?
Yeah, exactly. The fierceness, I love that you pinpointed that, because it's so true. And if we come together in that way, we hear the term to feel like you're not alone. And we love to reframe it to, I feel supported, so that we can start to create that change that we want to see, not connected to the loneliness, but how can we support each other? And I think for me, in my case, what has catapulted in a way my growth and my connection to wanting to evolve and my connection to my soul is the fact that I feel supported by my sisters and by sisterhood. I think that in the earlier stages, when I was opening up Pandora's box to all those things within me, there was so much loneliness and there was so much guilt and the shame, and it's still perpetrated within us, even within sisterhood. The other day, I was away with a friend in Paris. I live in France, and I went on a train. And my best friend, who was texting me, asked me, "Are you feeling guilty?" Because I was away and I had left the children with my husband. And I love that you said that you came to a place where you did not feel guilty, because that's exactly, I felt empowered. I felt in presence. I felt with myself. I knew that my children were really well cared for. I knew that they were in the most amazing hands because they were with their father. And I fully trusted, and I stopped micromanaging. I was there and I was in sisterhood. And that is what has allowed me to come even more full circle in terms of being in presence and allowing myself to go deeper into this healing integration space. And of course, you're teaching, Suzi, and leading the path alongside you. Allowing myself the opportunity to open to others has been the biggest gift. I can't imagine, how does that make you feel? And how can I support you? What do you need right now? And just the way that you have taught us to speak to ourselves, now we can, after we've done that, outwardly speak to our sisters in that way. So yes, that's my little blurb on that. And I love you guys.
Yeah, don't you wish this for every woman listening, for every mother listening, for every man listening? We're using the word sisterhood, but you're using the word support. And to
Yes.
have a support system that is intimate, that has your back. In this workshop that I just did, that Hannah was a part of, many women, but one in particular, when she was talking about her intention was to become her own biggest cheerleader. And that is what we can offer to each other, is that support where we reflect back to each other your essence, the woman that you came here to be, and then we can hold the space when you are falling down from the woman that you came here to be, and all of it in between. So, Henno, anything that you would like to add about sisterhood here?
Yes. So going back to how we were conditioned and in culture or family, whatever it is, all the shoulds that we were told as little girls become a judgment to ourselves. And since we cannot see ourselves for are fully enough and worthy that we are, then we cannot see other women for their full worth. And then we start judging them. And then we create this separation between each other. And it is not until we come back to ourselves and care for ourselves from the soul care perspective that we can see our light, and then our other person our support. Like in my case, like Leslie said, we speak every day, and it's that supportive system that we have. There's no, what is she doing? There's no jealousy, all the typical things that you can find in high school. And women are starting to figure out themselves, but they don't know because they haven't been embraced into their inner light. How beautiful would it be that there were no mean girls in high school, that they were truly supporting each other and having the power, because they are their own cheerleader, because they can look at the mirror and instead of seeing the pimples or the gray hairs, they can see a beautiful woman just for being there.
Yeah. Exactly, which goes back to the feminine qualities that we were speaking about earlier, the feminine qualities of being in abundance, being in our wholeness, recognizing our wholeness. This is the next stage and wave of evolution, because up until now, we've been raised in a culture of lack. Therefore, even between women, there is competition, and there has been competition. Competition is born out of not enoughness. Competition is born out of lack and insecurity. And we are here just representing what is possible, representing this next wave of the feminine, which is abundant. And when your starting place is abundance and wholeness, there is no need for competition any longer. As you're saying, like between the two of you, we just support each other because we are each individually immersed in our own wholeness and abundance. And so therefore we see abundance for the other individual. So the old paradigm of competition, which is still out there, and that's fine. We're always in a fluid state of releasing the old and stepping into the vision of what is possible. But there needs to be a few of us women, of us mothers that are going to say, well, we'll be the ones that will say, I see your light to such a degree that it doesn't threaten mine. I see your light to such a degree that it actually inspires mine, and that there is more than enough for you to shine so brightly and do you, and for me to shine so brightly and do me. So for everyone listening, please begin to be open that to whatever degree you are in your life right now shining, a sisterhood, a support system can galvanize your flame and feed you the oxygen to rise and to shine as never before, perhaps, in your life. So I want to say to everyone, the three of us are immersed in my community, the soul care community of spiritual psychology. And I also would be remiss not to mention that I run this beautiful sisterhood with Dr. Shefali called Luminous, and it's online. And so if you're listening from anywhere around the world, you can join Luminous, you can join the soul care community, keep listening to this podcast, connect with Leslie and Heno from the show notes. There are so many invitations just between the three of us for you to get deeply immersed in a supportive sisterhood, a supportive community, so that you can rise, you can shine your light, you can have someone to usher you through your dark times like never before. So I want to thank you both, as always. Such an enriching conversation. Any last words you want to say, Leslie? And then I'll go to you, Heno, before we close.
I was just going to say that you can still ask your husband what he wants for lunch, but you can ask yourself what you want and invite your sisters to come over and help you cook together. So there's so much possibility once you open that box. And thank you again for having us. And thank you for your support to us and to the community. And yes, thank you so much, Suzi.
It's my pleasure to support you guys. Just my pleasure and joy and honor. And yeah, here's to cooking for our husbands, having our husbands cook for us, our girlfriends, having our girlfriends over often, having tea parties on Zoom, all the things. So thank you. That was fantastic. I love the image. Heno?
I want to thank you and echo everything that Leslie said. And also an invitation to every woman out there to have that moment of seeing someone else, another woman when they're thriving, to really feel like, wow, I'm so happy for her. And to notice what that does to their heart. I'm happy for her.
Exactly. A way to move us into a state of abundance
Yeah.
ourselves.
And then those ripple effects will just come and come when we are supported and when we really are happy for every woman out there. Because the more we can have that, the more we can thrive and be empowered.
Exactly. And that certainly starts from really seeing the best in ourselves. And if and when you're not able to have that sister that can remind you. So thank you. You're each and both such a wealth of experience and passion. And we share so many passions. So thank you. I'm so grateful to you. For all of you listening, please come back next week for more and give yourself permission to thrive this week. Much love, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If there was something in this conversation that spoke to you, we'd so appreciate it if you would take the time to subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share this episode with women and mothers you know, because you are here to thrive. See you next time.